English Heritage notes Lindisfarne, also known as Holy Island, is one of the most important centers of early Christianity. Irish monks settled here in AD 635, and the monastery became the center of a major saint's cult celebrating its bishop Cuthbert. The masterpiece, now known as the Lindisfarne Gospels, was created here in the early 8th century. The ruins now visible are those of a 12th century priory which claim direct descent from the early monastery. But this is a special edition on Relentless Pursuit of Purpose, recording live from Northumberland. If this is your first time here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell so that you never miss a video. Our goal was to help you enter into a confirmed, confident, and eternal relationship with the source of all life and purpose. This will be a really cool episode for me because I get to combine two of my favorite things, apologetics and Vikings. So anyone who knows me knows that I've gotten pretty into watching Vikings and other offshoots like The Last Kingdom. And although those shows are not 100% accurate, they are most often attempting to get history correct. And the truth is that the real history is exciting enough that they aren't a lot of creative licenses that are necessary. So let's get back to some more of the background information regarding where we are today. So in the 8th century, England wasn't England. In fact, it was roughly during this time that King Alfred first sought to unite the various Anglo kingdoms. So when the Northmen or Danes came to England, they were not attacking a united front. So in fact, these and other attacks are in part what made the various kingdoms join together in order to bolster their defenses. In the northern part, a kingdom known as Northumbria, there was a town called Lindisfarne. Lindisfarne had a priory, which is where we are today. A priory is a small monastery or nunnery that is governed by a prior or a prioress. And those there take religious vows and they remain devoted to the scriptures and to their preservation. Now, EnglishHeritage.org again notes the devastating Viking attack on the Church of St. Cuthbert in 793 sent a shockwave through Europe. But a Christian community at Lindisfarne survived and recorded the event on the famous Doomsday Stone. So even before the Viking invasion, some in the priory believed there were signs of bad things to come. In fact, an Anglo-Saxon chronicle from that time records, "Here were dreadful forewarnings come over the land of Northumbria, and woefully terrified the people. These were amazing sheets of lightning and whirlwinds, and fiery dragons were seen flying in the sky. A great famine soon followed these signs, and shortly after, in the same year, on the 6th day before the Ides of January, the woeful inroads of heathen men destroyed God's church in Lindisfarne Island by a fierce robbery and slaughter. And Sitka died on the 8th day before the calends of March." And although there had been previous raids in Wessex, another English kingdom, this attack in Lindisfarne, Northumbria, was different. It's said that this Viking raid on the island of Lindisfarne, just off the Northumbrian coast, was not the first in England. A few years before, in 789, 3 ships of Northmen had landed on the coast of Wessex. They killed the king's reeve, who had been sent to bring the strangers to the West Saxon court. But the assault on Lindisfarne was different because it attacked the sacred heart of the Northumbrian kingdom, desecrating the very place where the Christian religion began in this nation. And it was where Cuthbert, who died in 687, had been bishop, and where his body was now revered as that of a saint. If you've seen the Viking series, The Last Kingdom, you'll remember how St. Cuthbert was considered a special saint of the church. The monk St. Bede, 672 to 735, wrote that St. Cuthbert labored far and wide to convert the people dwelling round about from the life of foolish custom to the love of heavenly joys. Additionally, a number of miracles were attributed to St. Cuthbert during his life. There's one story that tells of otters that would come out of the sea, walk to St. Cuthbert, and warm his feet when he was praying. However, the most notable and consistent miraculous testimony came in 698 AD. That year, 11 years after his death, Cuthbert's body was exhumed by the monastery's monks so that it could be reburied. Bede wrote that the body had not decayed at all. So when they opened the grave, they found the body whole and incorrupt. The brothers were awestruck and hastened to inform the bishop of their discovery, Bede wrote. Now, the brothers then clothed the body in fresh garments, then laid it in a new coffin, which they placed on the floor of the sanctuary. And it was here that the Vikings decided to attack, and why, in addition to the shock of the attack and the looting that took place, the sacred relics and St. Cuthbert were included in the raid's victim. Now, after the attack on Lindisfarne, the body of St. Cuthbert, along with other relics and artifacts, were moved to locations that the Vikings would have a hard time reaching. St. Cuthbert's body was relocated a few times, eventually being brought to Durham Cathedral in Durham, England, where it is buried today. Now, I do think it's important to provide some balance here. Now, one thing that shows got correct is the Anglos' consistent chronicling of events and people and the lack thereof by the Northmen. And as they say, history is written by the victors. The fact that the new Scandinavian threat was aimed at churches and monasteries was regarded as particularly horrifying at the time. The Vikings were often described as infidels or heathens who were completely lacking in conscience. Now, from the point of view of the Vikings, these attacks were probably made where it was thought that they would pay and could reap great rewards. The monasteries often contained large amounts of ecclesiastical silver and were not as well defended as the trading towns. The first Viking expeditions did not involve large fleets and thousands of men, so the churches and monasteries presented ideal targets for the smaller Viking contingents. In fact that the traveling Vikings did not adhere to the Christian God and thus did not shy away from plundering churches has greatly influenced the image of them that has built up since the Viking Age. Now, many of the preserved written sources of the period were written by monks, and their descriptions of the Vikings are distinctively negative. As the Vikings did not write their own chronicles, our picture of them is still colored by these early descriptions. Today, the Vikings are often described as especially bloodthirsty and ungodly, even if the archaeological evidence has revealed a period in which trade, fishing, and agriculture were just as characteristic of daily life. Unfortunately, the church has suffered at the hands of violent people throughout its history. The Bible records Saul agreed with putting him to death. On that day, a severe persecution broke out against the church in Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout the land of Judea and Samaria. Devout men buried Stephen and mourned deeply over him. Saul, however, was ravaging the church. He would enter house after house, dragging men and women, and put them in prison. And that long, painful lineage has continued. But as Tertullian, a 2nd century apologist, said, "Nor does your cruelty, however exquisite, avail you. It is rather a temptation to us. The oftener we are mown down by you, the more in number we grow. The blood of Christians is seed." In like manner, Lindisfarne and Northumbria, and most importantly, the church, survived these attacks and continued in the long, laborious work of translating and disseminating the scriptures. In fact, the Lexham Bible Dictionary records Bible translation into English goes back to the 7th century, when the poet and cowherd Caedmon retold Bible stories in his Anglo-Saxon verse. Shortly thereafter, Bishop Aldhelm of Trebonne translated the Psalms into Anglo-Saxon, England's first church historian. The Venerable Bede reportedly began to translate the Gospel of John, although his work is now lost. 2 centuries later, the English King Alfred the Great included an Old English verse in the Ten Commandments in his law code. At about the same time, extensive interlinear glosses, which explain Latin terms in Anglo-Saxon, began to appear in biblical manuscripts. In the late 10th century, a monk named Alfred inserted his complete Anglo-Saxon translation of the Gospels between the lines of the text in the Lindisfarne Gospels, an 8th century illuminated gospel book that is now kept in the British Library. There's a lot more I could say about the history here and about the Vikings, but we'll stop here for today. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. How does this knowledge of how the gospel spread in various places inform you? And are you a Vikings fan as well? Until next time, peace.